Good morning and welcome to our August 8th, 2023 Community Policing Podcast. Today I'm honored to have retired Lieutenant Jim Etzin from the Farmington Hills Fire Department. He just retired 2 Fridays ago. Jim is well known in the law enforcement and fire community, especially around Oakland County, for his involvement, one in the fire service, but for our Active Assailant Conference that he puts on every year. He's kind of been the instrumental in studying and analyzing active shooter incidents across this country, across the globe, really, and made contacts and that really brings back information to our local law enforcement partners, especially here in Oakland County, because that's where he's from, so that we can learn and be better responsive to our community across Oakland County. So, Jim, I appreciate you coming today. Your schedule is open now, so I appreciate you being here.
Well, Chief, thank you very much to you and the township for the opportunity.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. And Carrie and I, our cable studio director, have been, planning people. And one of the first ones after the Active Assailant Conference that we just had in June of this year, she said, "We got to get Jim in here because of the work that you put into it. It's a thankless job, kind of, but you don't do it selfishly. You do it selfishly for our profession. And when I say profession, the fire, EMS, and police is what we think of. But just prior to this, we talked about how important this stuff is for just the general population, business owners, and things of that nature."
Well, I appreciate those kind remarks, and thanks for paying attention to a topic that we wish we didn't have to pay attention to, but unfortunately we do.
Yeah, it's reality. And prior to, 2021, 22, this wasn't in our backyard, but it is now, twice. And we don't want to dwell on those incidents all the time, but we learned basically from these conferences that you've had now this was our 6th one this year, that here in Oakland County, we do prepare right. And we do know that when that alarm rings, when that call comes in, I think we proved as a collaborative response group from both police, fire, that we're prepared in this county.
Absolutely. You and I often talk about how Oakland County is the second most populous county in the state of Michigan with approximately 1.3 million residents, yet we don't have a single community in our county with greater than 87,000 residents, which means when a critical incident occurs, we're going to need our neighbors, and our neighbors are going to need us.
Yeah, and so we talk about OCTAC a little bit when we do that, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But let's find out about who you are a little bit and your career path. I mentioned you retired just not recently out of Farmington Hills Fire Department, but how long were you there? What got you into the Active Assailant, conference?
Well, first and foremost, I'm the father of a couple of Sparties. My son lives and works in the Lansing area, and my daughter lives and works in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And as you said, I just retired from the city of Farmington Hills after 29 years. My last assignment with the fire department was supervising the training division. And many years ago, I served as a special operations corpsman within the United States Navy, and left the Navy in 1994, moved here to Michigan. Found out what a basement was, what the chicken dance was, what a coney dog was, because I didn't know any of those things, and just continued my involvement in critical incident response and tactical medicine, but in the law enforcement community instead of the public safety community, or instead of the military community.
Yeah. So this year was the 6th annual Active Assailant Conference, but you were the original person that kind of created this idea. Let's talk a little bit how it started, and then a little bit about the attendance and how it's grown over the last few years to be this really a national event for us and worldwide event for some of the speakers that come.
Absolutely. Well, I served as the founder and executive director of the World's Professional Association for medics and physicians that are integrated into law enforcement SWAT teams. And I did that for many years and put on a number of international conferences. So I had some experience with conference organization. And then back in 2015, conceptualized what has now become the annual North American Active Assailant Conference that we hold here in Oakland County. And it really has grown throughout the years. And what makes the conference so unique is there's no shortage of professional conferences for law enforcement officers that feature law enforcement debriefs or case studies of critical incidents that have occurred. And the same thing can be said in the fire and EMS arenas. But with our conference, we blend both audiences. So approximately half of our attendees are law enforcement officers, and the others are fire and EMS and emergency management and people from other disciplines. So to bring all of those stakeholders together to hear the same messages at the same time, I think has certainly improved not only our preparedness here within Oakland County in the state of Michigan, but we have attendees coming in from all over the world, and they've indicated that it's helped them greatly as well.
Yeah, and I think there's some maybe misbeliefs or just unknowns when we talk about law enforcement or first responders, let's say, and the importance of those after action reports or debriefs that we can share amongst each other, being humble and having some humility and saying we did some things really good, but there are some areas where we really need to improve. But that happens on a regular basis in both of our professions, and I don't think people realize how much we really Monday morning quarterback ourselves, I guess we'll say.
Yeah, and these agencies that come in to talk about the tragic experiences that they went through, they're very generous with their time. They're very forthcoming with the information that they share, and like you said, sometimes, and they're very quick to discuss not only things that they did well, but things that they struggled with over the course of that day or night. Should agencies in Oakland County, like you said, we've already experienced, or elsewhere, face similar circumstances, maybe they can benefit from those lessons learned, and that overall response goes a little bit more efficiently as a result.
Yeah, and you mentioned at the beginning, an incident can overrun a city, a township, a village really quickly. Just because we have 100, some of our larger agencies in Oakland County have over 100 officers, there's not 100 officers on duty at that time. And we found with some of the incidents around here, well, let's talk MSU. We were able to send on the EMS side a strike force, is what I believe they referred to it as, to the Oakway systems of 5 ambulance companies to MSU to assist in whatever capacity was needed, right?
Yeah, and here in Oakland County, we're fortunate. I don't know if I would classify us as being resource rich, but we certainly do have more resources than the average county throughout the state of Michigan. And I think those other counties know that they can lean on us for assistance when they're experiencing a major event. And they've communicated to us that we can lean on them in the same way. Yeah,
and there's still emergencies going on outside whatever that critical incident could be. And not only that, but it's not only when we think of critical incidents, I think we automatically go right to schools, right? We go to that, but we are the home of probably one of the largest festivals in 2 weeks for the Dream Cruise at any given time. And some of the last and prior things, we had Austin, Texas here this year, who have a major downtown, who have events all the time, and things happen. Dayton, Ohio, we learned from in those incidents. So we're not only talking about someone going into an office building or a school and having some act of violence. We're talking any type of event.
Well, to put this in Oakland County specific terms, or make it that much more relatable to Oakland County, what happened on April 20th, 1999 in Columbine High School really resulted in these events being coined as school shootings, like you said. But there were certainly school shootings before that. There was mass violence before that. And many people may remember that before these were called school shootings, they were called going postal, when someone would enter a certain location or venue and cause harm to a great many people. And here in Oakland County with the Royal Oak Post Office, we many years ago experienced that. And one of our concerns right now is that there was emphasis on post offices many years ago, and then to this day schools, and now we're very concerned about open air venues and special events, and that's why people in positions like yours are doing your diligence that much more to protect your residents in those types of venues.
Yeah, and it's challenging, right? There's just, obviously the Vegas was probably one of the, I believe probably the largest mass casualty incident in an open air area that I can think of in my time as a law enforcement officer. So yes, this was only my second conference that I've attended, but let's add to the conference a little bit, because you said other disciplines. I think it's important to talk about the days. The main conference is the Thursday and Friday, where the meat of the conference is. But the Wednesday before, first we got to give Woodside Bible. If anybody watches from Woodside Bible, the church, they are a great partner for you, and a great supporter of the law enforcement first responder community to even host it.
Absolutely. It's a tremendous, the Woodside Bible Church campus in Troy is just an indescribably tremendous venue. Their staff does a phenomenal job supporting us. And because our general conference is really structured around being not featuring breakouts. You said we have the breakouts on Wednesday, but on Thursday, Friday, we bring all the stakeholders together. And the law enforcement officers are particularly intrigued hearing the fire and EMS messages, because that's new to them. And the fire EMS folks are hearing the law enforcement message and lessons learned. But we want everyone to understand each other's role during these incidents.
Yeah, and it's those breakout sessions on the days before. I actually sat through the PSAP, the 911 dispatch center, as most people are aware of it, and to recognize how overwhelmed a center can become, where you obviously have the incidents going on, but you also have concerned parents, rightfully, or we will say parents because those are the ones we debriefed this year, calling in wondering what is going on and wanting answers from the responders. Are my kids okay? Or are my, but to be able to include an elected official portion, schools officials portion, only increases that partnership and and recognizing that we can't do this alone as a first responder community.
Absolutely. So we bring in their peers. So we always have an appointed and an elected official breakout on Wednesday. It's a full day breakout. And we bring in appointed and elected officials who have experienced these tragedies firsthand to share those lessons learned with the attendees. So then those attendees can go back to their communities, evaluate their level of preparedness, and maybe make some enhancements or improvements to what they've already done.
Yeah. For this year, I know what feedback I gave you from the conference, but what was the overall impression that you got?
Well, I talked to my peers around the country, other conference organizers, and some of them have attended our conference, and they give it high marks. And actually, in the 6 years of doing this, we've never had even a single negative evaluation. And it's a very emotional conference because we're talking about mass violence over the course of 3 days, and we're cognizant of how emotional that conference is because we bring in responders, we bring in survivors to tell their stories. So we actually we staff the conference with mental health providers because everyone has their personal and professional life experiences, and we recognize that there's the potential that people could be emotionally triggered. So we have a mechanism in place to support them if and when that happens.
Yeah, and I can tell you that, it is an emotional week. Looking around the audience, which is first responders who are dealing with these things, but also when our elected officials are there, kind of gives the idea of what's needed in our field today. And it's so important for them to understand that they're welcome, because they are our supporters, right? They are some of the decision makers, our governing boards, and how important that is. I heard nothing negative as well. But I just want to touch on, we had people from, I believe it was Paris this year, presenting on things that are going overseas and in other countries that could affect us here, or vice versa. So that's an important thing. I think we touched on how is this event important to police and fire culture today. But I know we as an agency in Bloomfield Township send the majority of our reality-based instructors and some of the newer officers on our agency, as well as some executive staff, so that we can take those lessons learned and do it. The difference, I think, where you've really pushed, and I give you a lot of credit, is there's always the friendly banter between police and fire. We'll always have the red versus blue, right? But when it comes, there was always a belief we had different missions on these scenes. And yeah, we still do have different missions. Initially, if there's an active assailant in a building or somewhere, the law enforcement's priority is let's neutralize a subject and so we can get the fire department in here and triage. But that's changed now. There may be an active assailant on, a west side of a building that's rather large, but fire is being escorted in to start extracting or treating patients now, which is a newer, I don't know, it's newer. I mean, let's be real. In the law enforcement and fire world, those worlds are meeting together. It's not normal for a fireman to be putting on a tactical vest, a ballistic helmet, and a whole bunch of gear to go save lives. While there could be a hot zone another 3 hallways away.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me just, Chief, let me just take a moment of personal privilege to say that Bloomfield Township does an extraordinary job, including its police and fire departments. You're very progressive agencies and staying on top of the most contemporary strategies and tactics out there. So the residents of Bloomfield Township have a lot to be proud of with their public safety stakeholders. And really what we're looking for is, for many years, like you said, it was a linear response, because ultimately our goals are to stop the killing and stop the dying. So law enforcement would go in and try to accomplish the first half of that mission, and only after they had done that would fire and EMS go in to complete the second half of that mission. Now, we're not talking about hazarding or risking fire EMS unnecessarily, but over the years they have taken on more risk appetite, because they've learned that they can enter those environments with the protection of law enforcement sooner, to start providing some outstanding emergency medical care to anyone in need. So we've gone from really a linear strategy to more of a simultaneous strategy.
Yeah, let's touch on something real quick that I don't want to. I just want to kind of make it a simpler step, because some people may not understand the difference between what a paramedic engine or paramedic truck is versus just basic EMTs. The majority of our agencies around here now have paramedics on staff, which they can administer medicine. They're administering medical care, outside of just basic, extraction, get them to the hospital. They're able to provide life-saving measures, stop the bleed, right there.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. In many instances, they're bringing the emergency department right to what we call the point of injury, that specific location where that person is hurt. During these critical incidents, oftentimes the level of care itself may be basic life support instead of advanced life support, but the critical thinking that firefighter paramedics possess is essential to a lot of the decision making that needs to be done. So in some instances, they're applying their paramedic skills, but in all instances, they're applying their knowledge and experience to that decision making.
And it's not an easy program to get a paramedic license.
No, it's very challenging.
Very challenging, and we're fortunate here in Bloomfield Township, and I don't know the Farmington Hills way, but Bloomfield Township, we require at some point, everybody's a medic.
Yes.
And that's a big deal. There was a time where we had the ability to only hire paramedics. We're back to, working in supplying that training for our fire department personnel.
And as a longtime EMS coordinator and training officer, I can say that 2 paramedics are generally better than 1. 3 paramedics are generally better than 2. The more firefighter paramedics you have on a scene, the more things can occur simultaneously, and the faster that that person in need can get to definitive care, such as the hospitals in either Royal Oak or Pontiac.
Yeah, and just a small thing that I noticed in some of these conferences, again, I didn't go to all of them, but I've heard the debriefs in some of them, is you look at Aurora, Colorado, or things like that, where prior to that, blending of the law enforcement response and medic response, I didn't hear anyone this year complaining that the police cars all block the entrances for the police and fire, or the fire trucks and the medics, right? Because it brings such an influx of police cars that in some of these places they blocked off entrances and the egress and ingress and egress of the medics, trying to get to the scene to help out as well, which forced officers to be transported because we were the only cars near there. And it just shows, even though it's so minor in the grand scene, to just the general person, I didn't hear that this year, that there's that training we come back to.
We're getting better.
We're listening, that says, listen, we know we got to park on the grass. We can't block the road, and those little things can save somebody's life.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Chief, because we've had some success conveying that message to local law enforcement and fire and EMS, and it's paying dividends. But now we want to convey that same message to the community at large. And that is, if you have loved ones at that venue at the time that critical incident is occurring, you have to resist every fiber within you to drive there yourself, because you might be complicating matters for emergency responders when you do. So what we say is tune into that law enforcement agency's social media, or turn on the TV and look at the local media coverage and wait for that messaging. Because if we have 1,000 members of blended families driving to that school or other venue, it's going to make our job much more challenging.
Yeah, and that kind of takes us into our next thing about the media coverage. And I think there's a stat out there, maybe you know it, but at some point I thought I heard there was a stat like for every person involved or witness or victim inside of a building, and I'm talking, I could refer into a victim that's just a witness who's been traumatized. It brings like one or two, maybe two or more people per person. Well, at a school, you're talking about 1,000 students, you could get 2,000 parents,
yes,
coming from work, coming from home. That only delays our response and the saving of lives. We talk about what the media role plays, but let's add to that first that part of these incidents now, public information officers go right to those scenes. They're right at the command post. Mm-hmm. They're, as soon as an incident happens, we're working diligently to get some type of information, whether it's brief, but at least you're going to know what's going on and what the next steps for you as a loved one or guardian of these individuals. We do that pretty immediate, and we talk about it frequently.
Absolutely. Well, the media, they're absolutely stakeholders in this process as well, too. And we understand that their mission is to report the news and keep the community informed. So we're trying to share the information with them in as timely a manner as we can, but we're going to lean on them for that public messaging piece where we know there's going to be many loved ones out there in the community that want to go to the scene. We're discouraging that, but they want to reconnect with their family members or their friends, so they're waiting for us through the media to announce the family reunification area. Yep. And that's the place where we want you to go to reunite with your loved ones. But in return, what we ask of the media is to not contribute to the notoriety of these offenders, as was just once again demonstrated with the offender from Oxford High School. He indicated that he wanted more than his 15 minutes of fame. I mean, he wanted to become infamous. And unfortunately, the media can choose whether or not to play a role in contributing to that fame.
Right. And that was one of the themes of this year at the conference that I really noticed. And it was actually spoken to us through some of our communications personnel that were there, was they're going to give the name at least once. But from then on out, let's be done. We don't need to give them the time or energy. We need to focus on the families and the victims in the community to provide what they need. This is a long process, and I don't know if a community ever heals, right? You move on, you share your experiences so that another community can learn from what we did. And I credit our county, and I think for what they did for the Oxford community afterwards is great. But again, last week we just saw for 4 days, the majority of the victims and every single person in that community and the communities surrounding, because we all come together in Oakland County when something happens. And it's really, we should be focused on other aspects, not the person who did it.
Well, the FBI and the Secret Service have clearly established, and they have supporting data, that one of the largest contributing factors to this mass violence is that seeking of notoriety. So it's not just the opinion of survivors. There's some data to support that as well. And one of the things that we're seeing statistically is because many of these offenders are seeking that notoriety, they're choosing to survive the incident. Whereas many years ago, they may choose to die by their own hand. Now they are giving themselves up so they can have their day in court and they can live out their life sentence. And what many people don't realize is that the Oxford offender receives fan mail on a regular basis. If he were a few years older, he would receive marriage proposals. There's a subculture out there that worships and emulates some of these mass killers, mass murderers. So by contributing to their fame and them having their day in court and continuing to traumatize that affected community on a daily basis, as we've seen recently with Oxford, just adds salt to the wound.
Yeah. You know the family, some of the family members of victims in Columbine. And obviously they come to the conference every year and present an award, or they try to. This year I think we had the daughter of the coach. I'm
Yes.
sorry, I don't remember their name.
Dave Sanders.
Okay.
He was the only faculty member to lose his life at Columbine High School.
And you've gotten to know them and kind of become friends of that family. And how has the response to these incidents evolved since Columbine?
Well, I think, like you said, the after-action reports, there are many lessons learned, and I think there are many law enforcement agencies and fire departments out there that are doing their diligence by reviewing those after-action reports and learning those lessons. I'd like to think that our conferences play a role in that as well. So we don't have our heads in the sand. We're paying attention to current events. We're looking at what strategies and tactics work, which are more effective than others. We realize that each and every one of these incidents are different in their own way, but there are some common denominators that we pay very close attention to make our response, our emergency response, more efficient and more expeditious.
And the responsiveness to the communities is, I've been in the job 23 years, been around law enforcement a little longer than that, but the mindset has changed. There's no standoff. There's no waiting outside for a special weapons and tactics team to arrive on the scene. We teach, especially here in Oakland County, solo active shooter response.
Yes.
Solo response. If I'm the first one to that, and it doesn't matter who you are. If the chief of police or as a sheriff, I've heard say before, if he's driving by the building and it's going on, he's going in.
Absolutely. The expectation on every law enforcement officer, not only in Oakland County or the state of Michigan, but the entire country and beyond, is to go in there and stop the violence as soon as possible. And if they have to bypass 20 victims to get to that threat and stop it, that's the expectation of the initial arriving law enforcement officers. And then the next waves of law enforcement officers and firefighters can go in there and stop the dying. They can start taking care of victims. But with that being said, Chief, we have some expectations that we place on the general public as well, too. We want them to have heightened situational awareness, to be able to see something, say something, stop the bleed training that many people have undergone in recent years. Because at the end of the day, in Bloomfield Township, you have outstanding response times, as we do in Farmington Hills and many other communities throughout the county. But for the first 2 to 4 to 6 minutes, the people that are caught up in that incident own that incident. All the responsibility falls on them to survive that 2, 4, or 6 minutes until we can get there. And there are some things that they can do to improve their chances.
Yeah, and our community is learning, and then there's some videos that have been released this week. We will be hosting a critical incident training at our high school. And our school district approached us and asked us if we'd partner with them in that manner. And there's some apprehension from some of the teachers, and I understand why you would not want to be. You didn't become a teacher to train in an incident of this. But one thing what stood out this year in one of the debriefs, and I don't want to name some of these agencies, but one of them, the teachers I think told the kids, pretend you're sleeping, because there was, and I think they admitted they had no training or exposure to these incidents, so they didn't really. What I'm trying to say is we fall back on our training.
Yes.
And if you're exposed to it, something could trigger in that fight or flight that you're gonna. And listen, teachers are parents of these kids every day, all day long. I know. Obviously, I have a spouse in there, but teachers look at these students as their own children, and we've seen that across this country when these ridiculous, these heinous activities occur. The teachers are heroes. They're the first.
Absolutely.
They are the first responders. And I say teachers because again, we're talking schools a little bit there, and that seems to be the heightened energy on it. But the exposure for them, in even the apprehension, we understand, but we also want them to feel I don't want to say comfortable, that's the wrong word, confident that in the event something happens, they have the right tools and memory to kick in?
Well, the freeze response is a very common neurological response. And we want people, however they can, to overcome that freeze response and take action. So many people have heard the term run, hide, fight for many years. And we've kind of evolved that a little bit more into avoid, deny, defend, which really imparts the importance of taking action on the part of the people that are present at the time. Plan A is to try and avoid that violence however you can. Plan B, if you can't do Plan A, Plan B is to deny them entry into your environment, such as locking a door, or if there's a door securing device available, deploying that. And Plan C is the worst case scenario, is if A and B are not possible or have failed, then we expect people to defend themselves in any manner that they can.
Yep. And we've seen it, how successful it is. While there's tragic outcomes, the success of saving lives is undeniable in those incidents. We learn that when people do defend, they save lives.
Absolutely. And people are always looking for the secret sauce or the magic formula, and it's really early recognition more than anything else. But we now all live in a society where our faces are buried in a device of some kind a good part of the day. And someone in your position talks about distracted driving all the time. Well, our society has distracted living. People that are walking across the street looking at their device, or standing in a public place and looking at their device, and that gives them less time to recognize that something bad is happening. But the more time they have to recognize it, the more time they have to take action and potentially survive.
And we've seen recent cases out of surrounding jurisdictions where people have intervened in
Yes.
incidents, just assaults in parking lots, and saved lives.
Yes.
It saved lives. Let's talk a little bit before we move on, and we're going to have to wrap up soon, but we talk about how we're different in Oakland County. You started that off. You're a board member of OCTAC. I've talked about OCTAC in the past. It's our Oakland County Tactical Consortium, where we train, we respond, and we're adding that recovery piece, hopefully soon with the approval of the chiefs, to these incidents. But I think it's important for our residents of Oakland County and Bloomfield Township to know we all train very similar tactics, and the response and partnerships we have through OCTAC is really unique, and you see it more than I would with your traveling across this country.
Well, in Oakland County, again, we have approximately 1.3 million residents. We have 62 communities, and on the average day, those 62 communities can be autonomous and be in control of their destiny. There are some times where they need county government. There are some times where they need state or federal government. And it's the same with these types of incidents as well. So fortunately, most of the time, we're 62 different communities. But when we need to come together in a public safety context, bring multiple police and fire departments together in something what we would call a metropolitan response, as if we were a large city like the city of Detroit, OCTAC enables us to do that because, like you said, all emergency responders have been trained in the same manner. So you could have a West Bloomfield, Bloomfield Township, and Birmingham, the three officers come together, an Oakland County Sheriff's deputy, and coming together on a crisis like that, and they know exactly what to expect of each other, and the response is going to be more seamless and more effective.
And you come from the fire service where they have the mutual aid box alarm system, but you mentioned even the city of Detroit, who I believe just has to be a kind of a partner with our Oakland County agencies.
Yes.
Because they recognize the need. We have the NFL draft coming up soon. Their chief spoke at your conference for us, and he expressed this concern, like, I may have to rely on you, partners in Oakland County. So it doesn't always mean there's a county line. There's some different hurdles we have to jump when you go cross county, but the recognition from every agency, I think, across this country now, especially with the recruiting and hiring and manpower shortages, that we have to rely on each other. And if we can do it in a consistent manner, as we do in Oakland County, we are, I hate to say, I mean, you hate to have to say we're prepared, but we're prepared in the event something happens. And, we had our false alarm a few years ago at our high school, and it was our firemen and paramedics. It was second nature to them to get into their gear in the event that there was an active incident in our schools. They were in their TAC gear, ready to go with triage bags, ready to go. So I think that's important, and I appreciate you doing that. I guess my last question is, what do we as a public safety first responders need today to support what the work that we do?
Well, I would say that that members of the community throughout the country, I think, have an unrealistic expectation, and it's not their fault, but I think they believe that public safety communicates more regionally than they actually do. Because the norm, I mean, some regions have great collaboration and communication, others do not. I might be a little bit biased, but I think the only place in the United States that rivals the public safety collaboration and communication that we have here in Oakland County might be Northern Virginia. So it's really, at the end of the day, it's all about relationships. We have, I think, the best sheriff in the country. We've got great working relationships with the state police and our federal partners. We're communicating on a regular basis. We're training together. And I think that enables responses to be more effective and more successful. What we ask of the community is here in Oakland County, and I know here in Bloomfield Township, you enjoy the support of your residents, and we would just ask them to keep supporting law enforcement with when someone in your position or the fire chief says we need some enhancements with staffing, we need some enhancements with equipment, because we talked about the appointed and elected officials seminar that we have every year within our conference. And oftentimes we'll have a police chief and a fire chief and maybe a city manager or township supervisor sitting next to each other. And at the end of the day, they've all gotten an eyeful and an earful, and that township supervisor or city manager or mayor turns to their public safety executives and asks them, do we have what we need? Is there anything more that we need to facilitate? And the police chief or the fire chief might say, we're in good shape, but to be in better shape, we really could use another few employees or this vital piece of equipment or some funding or whatever the case may be. And if the community could continue to step up and support that, that helps us do our jobs.
Right. And we are very fortunate to where we worked that the communities are beyond supportive and we do have a great collaboration. Again, we talk about the fire chiefs, the Oak Way, the Oak TAC. We collaborate a lot amongst each other. You and I talk. We're on different departments, different disciplines, but you're here today to support us and talk about it with our communities. But hopefully other people are tuning into these podcasts and can see that collaboration, because we talk about it frequently. Is we have to get this information out so that the information. My last question or I guess response would be, is there anything private businesses or residents can do if they want to support the Active Assailant Conference? Is there any?
Well, so school personnel, school executives, school security personnel are certainly welcome to attend the conference, as are those that work in the corporate security sector as well, too. Our conference is really about being inclusive and not exclusive. We do have some attendance restrictions, obviously, because of the sensitivity of the information that's being discussed. But at the same time, we want our corporate security partners and our school security partners and their leadership to hear those messages. And it sounds like you've got a great relationship with your school district, and you've got that upcoming exercise. And we would encourage the same thing with some of your larger corporate citizens as well. And I know you have great relationships with them, but for them to approach someone in your position and say, what can we do to be a better corporate citizen and to better safeguard our employees and our customers? I'm sure you and your staff have a lot of good information for them.
Yeah, and we have, I mentioned it last time, but our community relations officer is trained in the surveys of the buildings and safety surveys and even residential surveys at no cost. So our residents can reach out to us, and we would allow them to help out other areas as well.
Yeah, and on that note, I will say that no venue, small or large, no community, small or large, is immune from these tragedies. So it's incumbent upon us to prepare as best we can. We're not saying it should dominate our lives or we should live our lives in fear, but we just want to do our diligence to prepare as best we can.
Situational awareness.
Yes.
So, Jim, I want to thank you for coming on today.
Well, Chief, thanks for having me.
You and I could talk this all day and for several hours, I'm sure. But I appreciate you taking your time. You're a retiree now. I knew your schedule would be open just a little bit.
I'm a retiree on a fixed income. I've learned to say that.
Yeah. So, again, thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for the opportunity.
We will be right back.
When I was about 5 years old, I went to a fair with my family, and I saw an officer, as a canine officer, and I was like, oh, I want to do that when I grow up.
I actually did an interview at the academy, and after that I set up a ride-along, and the ride-along was great.
After I completed my bachelor's degree, I thought to myself, there's something more I want to do. And with law enforcement, I've always had an interest in law enforcement. I just never acted on it until I got my bachelor's degree.
I had a personal experience when I was a nanny, and the kid I nannied for got killed by a drunk boater, and that's part of the reason I became a police officer.
I left the Marine Corps in 2017, and I used my degree working in marketing for 4 years. I had been unhappy in the job I was previously in, and I put myself through the police academy.
It's not an overly busy department. You know, we do have our handful of big crimes, but you're not going to be running from major crime to major crime to major crime.
Your workday is actually what you make it. So above the calls that you get dispatched, there's plenty of time to go out there and be a proactive police officer and kind of dabble a little bit in what is your specific interest in police work and seek out the crime.
Well, the community itself is very supportive of our police department, and we are very fortunate to have that here. It's a good sized department, but it's not so big where you get lost.
As far as the camaraderie goes within the department, it's great. Roll call is probably one of the funnest times on shift. Getting to go out to these different calls and hanging with these guys or girls is a bonus.
I think that's the biggest thing, is the respect and friendliness. We have a lot of amenities here. We can work out on duty during our breaks for lunch. There's so much more. I really like working here.
From the time of my ride-along at the start of the application process till the final interview to the job offering, it's been nothing but a great experience.
Wouldn't want to be anywhere else. It's the people here, the people I work with every night. It's a great place to be, and I couldn't have made a better choice.
I know for me, it's an honor to work here. This is a department that I knew as soon as I heard about them, this was where I wanted to work and where I wanted to continue and hopefully work my whole career here.
Welcome back to our Community Policing Podcast. Just a few things in our crime report for the last couple weeks, as we missed a podcast last week due to some scheduling conflicts. However, over the last few weekends, in particular, the last 3 weekends we have seen an increased number of impaired driving accidents, some with injury, some without injury. We've had at least 7 or 8 in those last 3 weekends, which is quite a few for our agency. We just want to remind our residents and those that are out having a good time at night, there's really no excuse for drunk driving any longer. There's way too many rideshare apps. There's alternative ways to get home rather than driving a vehicle. In the end, there's always a victim to an accident, and unfortunately, the increase has been over the last 3 weekends has really been unacceptable. Additionally, we had an incident last week that brought a large police presence around the school farm, the Bauer School Farm. We responded that evening on reports of possible gunfire in the field in that area. That turned out not to be the case. We were able to determine the cause of that. There was no threat to the community. However, there was a large police presence both in and around I-75 and the Squirrel Lake Adams, Squirrel Lake Squirrel area. So if there was any questions or concerns about that, there was no active community threat. We were able to quickly, with the help of our community partners, determine what that was, and we're able to silence the problem for the evening. We also want to remind our residents of our 9 p.m. routine. That is kind of a national program. I've talked many times, just about every podcast, about our larceny from autos, our stolen autos, which continued again last weekend. I think we had 3 or 4 stolen autos last weekend. But we want to remind our residents to set that kind of the 9 p.m. routine reminder, which is remove any valuable items from your vehicles, especially firearms and personal information such as computers. We want you to lock your vehicle doors. It's really easy. Almost all vehicles have key fobs nowadays. You can do that right from the comfort of your own house. Close your garage door. Some of the vehicles that have been stolen and the property stolen have been from cars that were left in the garage with their key fobs in the vehicles, thinking they were safe. Close and lock all your exterior doors to your home. And if you have security lights that you choose to leave on at night, that's great. And then turn on any exterior lights that you may have. Those are always reminders. We'll keep reminding it because property crime is our number one issue going on right now. We have had a lot of requests for subdivisions and the speeding and driving behaviors in the subdivisions. We're doing our best to get cars into those neighborhoods. We did recently purchase what we call 2 traffic trailers. We have a list of neighborhoods that those need to go into that we'll set up for a few days at a time so we can track some of the information and speeds in neighborhoods. One thing I want to remind our residents is a lot of times these complaints are actually residents who live in the neighborhood or new drivers in the neighborhood who don't recognize how fast they're going. So we just want to remind our residents to please be safe, make good decisions when you're on the roadways, and if you need anything from the police department, please do not hesitate to give us a call. Thank you, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.